The carriage door opened onto a world Marisol Wren had only ever imagined from the windows of borrowed lives. Hartmore Hall rose from the morning mist like something dreamed rather than built. Pale limestone, the color of clotted cream, 3 stories of arched windows, a sweep of gravel drive lined with hedges so precisely cut they looked combed. The air smelled of wet boxwood and wood smoke, and something deeper she couldn't name, something that reminded her, absurdly, of a place she had never been. Her boots crunched on the gravel. The pewter buckle on her travel case, the only one her mother hadn't sold, caught the thin October light. "Miss Wren?" The voice belonged to a tall, narrow-shouldered woman in slate-gray wool, hands folded at her waist, with the rigid composure of someone who had folded them that way for 30 years. The housekeeper. Marisol curtsied, just deeply enough. "Yes, ma'am. I was told to present myself at 8:30. You are 7 minutes late. The mail coach lost a wheel outside Fenwick. I walked the last mile." Gray eyes flicked down to her hem, where the mud had dried in a stiff arc. Something, not warmth, but perhaps a softening at the edges of judgment, passed across the housekeeper's face. "Mrs. Penhallow, you will follow me. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not look directly at His Grace unless he addresses you, and you will not, under any circumstance, enter the East Wing. Is that understood, Miss Wren?" "Yes, Mrs. Penhallow." "Then come." Marisol followed her up the steps, her heart a small, frantic bird against her ribs. She had 10 guineas a month to earn. She had her mother's medicines to pay for, her sister's lungs to mend, and her father's debt to keep from drowning them all. She did not yet know that the man inside this house had been waiting 14 years for her to walk through that door. The entrance hall swallowed sound. Marisol's footsteps, which had rung sharp on the gravel outside, became hushed against black and white marble laid in a checkered pattern that made her dizzy if she looked at it too long. A staircase curved upward, like the inside of a great seashell. A chandelier the size of a small carriage hung above her, unlit, its crystals catching what little light fell through the high windows. She had never been in a room that made her feel smaller. "Your duties begin tomorrow at dawn, Mrs. Penhallow said, walking briskly without checking to see whether Marisol followed. "His Grace requires a cataloger for the late Duke's library. You were recommended by Reverend Halliday on the strength of your French, your Latin, and your handwriting. You will be paid 10 guineas the calendar month, room and board included. Your half-day is Sunday after chapel. You will not—" She stopped so abruptly that Marisol nearly walked into her shoulder. A man had emerged from a doorway at the far end of the hall. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, in a way that suggested rowing or riding rather than tailoring, dressed in a charcoal coat without ornament. His hair was the color of dark honey, his face shadowed by the angle of the morning, and he held a riding crop in one gloved hand, as though he had been on his way out and had stopped only because something had caught him. "Your Grace," Mrs. Penhallow said, dipping into a curtsy that, despite her age, was as smooth as poured water. Marisol curtsied too, eyes fixed on the marble between his boots, exactly as she had been instructed. There was a silence. It went on too long. She felt her face begin to heat. Had she done something wrong already in the first 30 seconds? And then she heard him speak, in a voice that was lower and quieter than she had expected, the kind of voice that made a room tilt toward it. "Look up." She didn't move. The instruction conflicted with the housekeeper's, and she could feel Mrs. Penhallow stiffening beside her. "Miss Wren," he said, more gently. "Look up, please." She raised her eyes. His were gray-green, the color of river stones under water, and they were doing something she could not parse. Searching her face, moving from her brow to her mouth, to the small scar on her chin, and back again. as though confirming the answer to a question he had been carrying for a very long time. He went, very quietly, white. "Your Grace," Mrs. Penhallow said, "is something— Leave us. Your Grace, the girl has only just— Mrs. Penhallow." His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "Leave us, please." The housekeeper hesitated for the smallest fraction of a second, and then she was gone, her skirts whispering across the marble, the door at the far end of the hall closing behind her with a soft, deliberate click. Marisol stood alone with him. She had been raised to know how a young woman in a great house ought to behave when she found herself alone with its master, and every rule was screaming at her now. She thought of her case at her feet, of the 10 guineas, of her sister coughing into a handkerchief in the cold front room at home. "Your Grace," she managed, I'm afraid I don't." "You don't remember me." He said it without accusation, almost wonderingly, as though confirming something to himself. "Of course you don't. You were 6. The word 6 landed in her chest like a small cold stone. "I beg your pardon." He took one step forward. Only one. He seemed to be conscious of the space between them, careful of it. The writing crop, she noticed, had dropped from his hand at some point. It lay on the floor between them, like a forgotten thing. "You had a yellow ribbon," he said, very slowly, as though he were translating from a language he had not spoken aloud in years. "It was tied around the wrist of a wooden horse. You gave the horse to me through the railings of a fence. You told me," his mouth moved in something that was almost, but not quite, a smile, "that I was to keep it safe until you came back for it. That if I kept it safe, you would marry me when we were grown." The hall went very still. Marisol could hear her own pulse, loud and stupid in her ears. "That is not possible," she heard herself say. The words came out from very far away. I have never been to Hartmoor in my life." "No." He took a slow breath. "But I have been to Ashbourne." The name of her childhood village, spoken in this man's voice in this marble hall, was the most disorienting thing she had ever heard. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Theron Voyle," he said. "The 11th Duke of Hartmoor. And I have kept the horse, Miss Wren, for 14 years. I have kept the horse." She did not faint. She came close. The marble tilted. The chandelier seemed to drop an inch toward her. But she had not been raised to faint, and she did not. She gripped the handle of her travel case until the leather creaked beneath her glove, and she made herself breathe. "Your Grace," she said, when she trusted her voice, "I am very sorry, but you must be mistaken. I came here to take a position. I came here because my family—" She stopped. She would not say the rest of it. She would not stand in a duke's entrance hall and tell him about her sister's lungs, her mother's hands shaking over the medicine bottle, the letter from the bailiff she had folded into the lining of her case so she would not have to look at it on the journey. "I came to work, Your Grace. Nothing more. Whoever the child was, it was you. It was not." The words came out sharper than she had meant. She heard them ring against the marble, and she lowered her eyes at once. "Forgive me," she said. "I forget myself." "No." His voice had changed. Something inside it had loosened, or perhaps tightened. She could not tell. "Don't. I would rather you forgot yourself than spoke to me as a servant should. I would rather, in fact, that you did not speak to me as a servant at all. I am a servant, Your Grace. You are the cataloger of my late father's library," he said. "Hardly the same thing. And you are also—" He stopped. Something behind his eyes flickered. "Miss Wren, may I ask you a question, and may I ask you to answer it without consideration of my rank?" She nodded, because she did not trust her voice. "Is your father's name Edmund Wren?" The cold stone in her chest grew larger. "Yes." "And was he," Until 14 years ago, the steward of the Ashbourne estate of the Earl of Lindenmere? Yes. And did he, in the summer before he left that post, have a daughter, small, dark-haired, very serious, who used to play on the bank of the river that ran along the southern boundary of Ashbourne, near the place where the old fence was broken? She could not answer. Her throat had closed. He took another step. He was perhaps 6 feet from her now, close enough that she could see quite clearly that his hand was trembling at his side. There was a boy, he said quietly, on the other side of the fence. He was 13 years old. He had been sent to Ashbourne for the summer, to be away from a house that was a flicker of something old and dark across his face. Not kind to him. He was lonely in a way he could not explain, and one afternoon he heard a child singing, and he followed the sound to the river. And there was a small girl with mud on her pinafore, holding a wooden horse with a yellow ribbon tied to its wrist. Marisol could not breathe. She gave him the horse, Theron Vial said, through the broken fence, and she told him a thing he has remembered every single day since. Memory came at her sideways, the way things do when they have been buried so deeply you have stopped looking for them. The river, the smell of crushed grass, a boy in a too-clean coat, with eyes that did not match the rest of him, older than they should have been, sadder than they should have been. A wooden horse her father had carved her for her 6th birthday, the only toy she had loved, the only one she had given away. "You look sad," she had said to him. "You can have him, but you have to keep him safe. You have to promise." "I promise," the boy had said. "And when I'm grown," she had told him, with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old, "I'll marry you, so you won't be sad anymore." She had forgotten him within a year. Her father had lost his post that autumn. Her family had moved south. The river and the fence and the boy had folded themselves into the soft blur of a childhood she rarely had the time to revisit. She had forgotten him. He had not forgotten her. "Oh," she said. It was a very small word. It came out of her like the air going out of a room. Theron Vial's eyes closed, just for a moment, as though he had been bracing himself all this while against the possibility that she might not remember at all, and now the bracing was no longer required. "I thought," he said, "for 14 years that you were a story I had told myself, a thing my mind had made up to keep me company. And then last month, Reverend Halliday wrote to me about a young woman in want of a position. Clever, well-spoken, the daughter of a man named Edmund Wren, who had once been steward at Ashbourne. And I—" He stopped. He had to. "I had to see," he said. "I had to know." Marisol set her travel case down on the marble, very carefully, as though it might break. "Your Grace," she said, I cannot. You can refuse the post." He said it at once, before she had finished. "You can turn around and walk back down the drive, and I will have a carriage take you wherever you wish to go, and a year's wages settled on your family before sundown. You owe me nothing. The promise of a 6-year-old child is not a debt. I want you to understand that, and I want you to understand it before anything else is said in this house." She stared at him. A year's wages, settled before sundown, for a promise no child could be expected to keep. She thought of her sister. She thought of the bailiff's letter folded into the lining of her case. She thought, with a clarity that frightened her, that a man who would offer that much for a memory might be a man who had been alone for a very long time. "Why," she said, "do you not simply give me the wages and send me home?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Because," he said, "I would like, if you are willing, for you to stay. As your cataloger. As my cataloger. And nothing more. Nothing," he said, "that you do not freely choose. I give you my word, Miss Wren. And I have not given my word lightly to anyone in 9 years." She thought about that 9 years. She set it aside to think about later. I have conditions, she heard herself say. His brow lifted, a fraction of an inch. Name them. My family is to be told nothing of any of this. Not the river, not the horse, not your remembering. They are to believe I am here as a cataloger on the recommendation of Reverend Halliday, on a salary of 10 guineas the calendar month. My mother is proud, Your Grace. She would not accept charity wrapped in a story. Done. Second, the wages you mentioned, the year's settlement, I will not accept. I will earn what you pay me. If at any point you find my work wanting, you will dismiss me, and I will go without protest. A slow, strange expression crossed his face. It was not quite a smile. It was something underneath a smile. Done. Though I will tell you now that you will not find me an easy man to disappoint. Third. She drew a breath. This one was harder. Whatever, you remember, Your Grace. Whatever I said to you through that fence when I was 6 years old, you will not ask me to honor it. Not as a hint, not as a hope, not as a thing left unsaid between us. The girl who gave you the horse was a child. I am not her any longer. If I am to stay, I am to stay as a woman who was hired, not as a promise that came walking up your drive. The silence after she finished was longer than any that had come before. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet. I will not ask you to honor it, he said. I give you my word on that, too. But Miss Wren. Your Grace? You should know, he said, that I have honored it. Every day, for 14 years. He bent. He picked up the riding crop from the marble. He turned once to look back at her, and she saw, in that turn, something she would think about later, in the dark, for a long time. It was the look of a man who had just discovered that the thing he had been carrying alone for half his life could possibly be set down. Mrs. Penhallow will show you to your rooms, he said. Welcome to Hartmoor, Miss Wren. He was halfway down the hall when she found her voice. Your Grace, he stopped. He did not turn. The horse, she said. Do you still have it? A pause. Yes, he said. I still have it. And he was gone. The room they gave her was on the second floor of the west wing, at the end of a corridor that smelled of lavender and old wood. It had a narrow bed with a green coverlet, a writing desk under a sash window, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a small iron grate where someone had already laid a fire. The fire was burning. Someone had lit it for her before she arrived. Marisol stood in the middle of the room with her case still in her hand, and she could not, for a long moment, persuade herself to set it down. I have honored it, every day, for 14 years. She set the case down. She crossed to the window. The view was of a kitchen garden enclosed by a low stone wall, beyond which fields rolled away in long, brown corduroy lines toward a copse of beeches. A soft knock at the door. Come in. A girl perhaps a year younger than herself slipped inside, carrying a tray with a pot of tea and a covered dish. She had freckles across the bridge of her nose and the bright, busy eyes of someone who had already heard everything there was to hear that morning and would not be telling. I'm Bryn, miss. I've been put to look after you. There's broth and bread. Cook said you'd want something warm after the road. Bryn, that is very kind. Thank you. Mrs. Penhallow says I'm to give you till midday to settle, and then bring you to the library. His Grace will meet you there himself. He doesn't usually. Bryn paused, balancing the tray on the desk. Meet new staff himself, I mean. I see. It's a lovely library, miss. Smells of old paper and beeswax. Lady Idony goes in sometimes to read. She's the Duke's sister, but mostly it's been shut up since the old Duke died. Marisol took her gloves off slowly. How long ago was that? 9 years this Michaelmas. Bryn's voice dropped a little, the way servants' voices always did when they were about to say a thing that should not be said. His Grace was 18. He hadn't expected it. Nobody had. 9 years. The same 9 years he had not given his word to anyone. Bryn, she said carefully, is there? But Bryn had already moved on, lifting the cover off the broth, fluffing the pillow, all the small kindnesses of a girl who had been trained not to leave silence for a question to land in. I'll come for you at noon, miss. The bell at the end of the hall is mine. Pull it twice if you need anything before then. Welcome to Heartmoor. She was gone before Marisol could thank her properly. Marisol sat down on the edge of the bed. The broth was hot. The bread was fresh. The fire was burning. None of it had been there an hour ago. All of it had been arranged for a stranger. She thought suddenly of the bailiff's letter folded into the lining of her case, and of the 10 guineas, and of her sister Linnea's cough, the one that had begun in August and not stopped. She thought of a boy in a too clean coat by a broken fence. She got up. She crossed to the case. She unfastened the buckles with hands that were not entirely steady, and she lifted out from beneath her 2 spare shifts a small object wrapped in a square of gray flannel. She had told Theronville that she had not been to Heartmoor in her life. That much was true. She had not told him what she carried. She unwrapped the flannel, a pewter button, the size of a sixpence, slightly tarnished. Stamped on its face was a stag's head with a single broken tine. The crest, her mother had once told her, in a voice gone strange, of a house that had lost a son. The boy by the fence had pressed it into her palm before he ran back to whatever house had been unkind to him. So you'll know me, he had said, if I find you again. She had forgotten him. She had not forgotten the button. She wrapped it again. She slid it into the pocket of her travel dress, against her hip, where it would lie warm and small and secret through whatever happened next. Then she went down to the library. The library at Heartmoor took up the whole north end of the ground floor. It had 2 stories, a wrought iron gallery running around the upper level, and tall arched windows that let in a thin November light through their leaded panes. The smell was exactly what Bryn had promised. Old paper, beeswax, and underneath it, the dry, sweet ghost of pipe smoke from a man who had not smoked in 9 years. Theronville was not in it. A young woman was. She was perched, sideways, on the arm of a leather chair, one slipper dangling from her toe, a book open on her lap that she was very plainly not reading. She had her brother's honey-dark hair and none of his stillness. When the door opened, she sprang up with such immediate enthusiasm that the book slid off her lap and hit the rug with a soft thump. You're here. Oh, finally. I have been waiting since breakfast. Come in, come in. I'm Idony, and I'm not supposed to be the first person you meet. But I bribed Bryn with a hair ribbon. So here we are. My lady, Marisol curtsied. Stop that. Nobody's watching. Idony when we're alone. Lady Idony when Mrs. Penhollow is within 40 feet, which is most of the time. Sit down. You look like you've seen a ghost. Have you? Theron has that effect. I keep telling him to smile more, but he won't. Marisol did not quite sit down. Your brother, His Grace, said he would meet me here. Yes, and he will, in about a quarter of an hour, because Grandmother summoned him into her sitting room the instant she heard you'd arrived, and Grandmother does not release her hostages quickly. Idony grinned. She wants to look at you, you see, which is why I came down first, to warn you. Warn me of what? Of her. Idony picked up the fallen book, turned it over once in her hands, and set it on a side table without marking the page. Grandmother is the Dowager Duchess Heartmoor. She is 73. She has buried a husband, 2 sons, and a daughter-in-law. and she has the manners of a person who has decided the world owes her the rest of its civility in advance. She will be perfectly correct to you. She will also try, in the course of the next 10 minutes, to find out exactly what kind of girl my brother has installed in this house, and exactly how much trouble you are likely to cause. I don't intend to cause any. That, my dear Miss Wren, is what people who cause trouble always say. Idane's grin softened. I don't mean it badly. I'm glad you're here. Theron has been. She stopped. The shadow that crossed her face was the same one Marisol had seen, very briefly, on her brother's. Not himself, for a long time, and this morning, before you came up the drive, he was standing at the window of the breakfast room, and I have not seen him stand at a window in years. Marisol did not know what to say to that. She was saved from having to say anything, because at that moment, the library doors opened, and a small, very upright old woman came in. She was not what Marisol expected. She had expected someone tall, glittering, terrifying in the manner of the dowagers of novels. The Dowager Duchess of Heartmore was perhaps 5 feet in her shoes. She wore black silk so plain it was almost severe. Her hair was the color of pewter, drawn back into a knot so neat it looked carved. Her hands, folded in front of her, were small and very still. Her eyes were the same gray-green as her grandson's, and they missed nothing. Idane, she said, without looking at her granddaughter. You have a music lesson. I had it yesterday. You have another. Idane rolled her eyes affectionately, dropped a kiss onto the top of her grandmother's head, to which the old woman submitted with the long-suffering patience of someone who had given up on dignity in this particular battle, and slipped out of the room. The dowager looked at Marisol. Sit, Miss Wren. Marisol sat. So did the dowager, in a high-backed chair on the other side of the cold hearth. I shall be brief, the old woman said. I am told you are the daughter of Edmund Wren, who was steward at Ashbourne in my brother-in-law's time. I am told you are well-educated, well-spoken, and in want of a position. I am told you were recommended by a clergyman of unimpeachable character. And I am told, her eyes narrowed, very slightly, by my grandson, that you are not to be questioned about anything else. Marisol kept her hands folded. I am not, however, the dowager continued, in the habit of obeying my grandson. So I shall ask you the question he has forbidden me to ask. Look at me, Miss Wren. Marisol looked. Did you know, when you accepted this position, who he was? No, Your Grace. Do you know now why he was prepared to hire you sight unseen on the recommendation of a country parson? A pause. Marisol waited. I have an idea, Your Grace. And what is your idea? That your grandson and I knew each other, very briefly, when we were children, and that he remembered, and I did not, and that he wished to see whether I was the same person. The dowager was silent for a long moment. You are honest, she said at last. I had not expected that. It is a quality almost extinct in young women who arrive in great houses. Honesty is cheaper than pretense, Your Grace. My family cannot afford pretense. A flicker, possibly amusement, possibly approval, possibly nothing, moved across the old woman's face. My grandson, she said, has been alone for 9 years. He is alone in a way that money cannot mend, and rank cannot mend, and his sister and I, who love him, cannot mend. I have watched him become a careful man, a very careful man. Do you know what a careful man is, Miss Wren? A man who has been hurt, Your Grace. A man who has decided that hurting again would be the end of him. The dowager's voice did not rise, but it gathered weight, the way the sea does before a swell. I will tell you something now, and I will tell you only once. If you are here to take advantage of his memory of you, if you are here to play at being the girl he has imagined you are for 14 years, I will know within a fortnight, and you will be on a coach south by the end of the same day, with nothing to your name but the wages you have earned. Are we clear? Yes, Your Grace. And if you are not here to take advantage, the old woman's hands unfolded, refolded. Then I will say this, also only once. Do not let him drown in it. Do not let him build a life around a 6-year-old girl and a wooden horse. He needs to live, Miss Wren. He needs to be made to live. Whatever you are to him, friend, stranger, employee, anything, make him live. Marisol could not, for a moment, find her voice. I will try, Your Grace. The Dowager looked at her for a long moment. Then she rose. You may stand, Miss Wren. My grandson will be here directly. I shall not be. She crossed to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. He kept the horse on his bedside table, she said, without turning, from the age of 13 until the age of 18. Then his father died, and he put it in a drawer, and he hasn't, to my knowledge, opened that drawer since. She went out. Marisol sat in the silent library, her hands very tightly folded in her lap, and felt the pewter button in her pocket grow warm against her hip. He came in through the gallery door, not the main one. She heard his footsteps on the iron stairs before she saw him, and she understood, the moment she did see him, that the conversation with his grandmother had cost him something. He looked tired in a way he had not looked at 8 o'clock that morning. His coat was the same. His hair had been pushed back at some point with an impatient hand. He had a book under his arm. Miss Wren, I apologize for keeping you waiting. Your Grace. My grandmother. He hesitated. Has she been kind to you? She has been honest with me, Your Grace, which I think with her may be a kindness. A brief, surprised look. The corner of his mouth moved. It was not a smile. It was the place where, in another man, a smile would have been. That, he said, is exactly the right answer. He came down the spiral stair with the unhurried care of a man who had grown up running on it. Shall we begin? Begin? Your work. You came here to catalog a library. I should not, on your first day, occupy you with anything but the task you were hired for. It was so practical, and so deliberately practical, that she almost laughed. He was, she realized, trying to give her a way to begin without the weight of the morning between them. He was offering her the cataloger's role she had asked him for in the entrance hall, neatly and without ceremony. She accepted the gift. Then perhaps you will show me the system, Your Grace. There is none. None? My father acquired books the way other men acquire horses, passionately, without strategy, and without ever telling anyone where he had put them. There are perhaps 4,000 volumes in this room. They are arranged by no principle I have ever been able to identify. There is, I am told, a first edition of Paradise Lost, somewhere on the upper shelves, which I have not seen in 9 years. 9 years. She had not meant to repeat the number. He glanced at her, briefly. He understood that she had heard it elsewhere. Yes, he said. 9 years. He set the book he was carrying on the table between them. It was a small, plain thing in green calfskin, older than it looked, she thought, by the softness of the corners. This was his commonplace book, Theron Vial said. My father's. I thought you should see it before you began. There are notes in it about the collection, not many, and not in any order, but a few may help you begin to understand what was important to him. I would be, he paused, grateful, if you would be careful with it. I will, Your Grace. Thank you. She took it from him. Their hands did not touch. He had set it down before she lifted it, with a precision that struck her as deliberate. She remembered, with a sudden small pang, the riding crop falling forgotten between them in the entrance hall, and she thought, he is being careful of me. He has been being careful of me from the first moment. I should leave you to it, he said. The bell pull beside the door rings to the kitchen if you require anything. There is a cold meal laid in the small dining room at 1 o'clock. You may take it there or have it brought up here, as you prefer. I will, Your Grace." He stopped. "May I ask you a question?" A flicker of wariness behind his eyes. "Yes. You said this morning that the boy by the fence had been sent to Ashbourne to be away from a house that was not kind to him." She watched him very carefully. Why was the house not kind? She had not planned to ask. The question came out of her before she could weigh it. She thought for a moment that he would not answer, that he would draw himself up, recall who he was and who she was, and bow himself out of the library. He did not. He moved instead to the leather chair beside the cold hearth and sat down in it, slowly, the way a man sits down when his legs have asked him to. "My mother died," he said, "the winter I turned 7. My father loved her in a way that made him unfit, for a long while afterwards, to love anyone else. He was not cruel. He was absent. And there was a tutor in the house in those years who was a small, controlled breath, unkind. My father did not see it. I did not know how to tell him. So I was sent, the following summer, to Ashbourne, to my mother's brother, the Earl of Lindenmere, to be away for a while." The room was very still. "It was not," he said, "a happy time in my life. The Earl was kind, but he had no children of his own, and I did not know how to be in a house where no one was angry. I was lonely in a way I had no words for. I used to walk along the river. I was not supposed to." One afternoon, his eyes met hers, briefly. One afternoon I heard a child singing. Marisol's hand had risen, without her telling it to, and gone to her pocket. She felt the pewter button through the cloth. "You gave me a horse," he said, "and a yellow ribbon, and you told me a thing nobody had told me in a long while, that you would come back, that you would not leave me where I was. I believed you with the absolute certainty of a person who had not yet learned what believing costs. Your Grace, that summer ended. I was sent home. The tutor, by then, had been dismissed, for reasons that had nothing to do with me. I never went back to Ashbourne. I never saw you again." A pause. "I learned eventually what believing costs. But I kept the horse, Miss Wren, because the horse was the proof that there had been a moment, once, when I was 13 years old, when someone had wanted to make me less alone. And I did not." He stopped. "I did not have very many of those moments in the years that came after. I needed the proof." She had to wait before she could speak, for her throat to be her own again. "I didn't know," she said, "that I had given you the proof of anything. I thought I had given you a toy." "You gave me," he said, "a great deal more than a toy." The fire was not lit. The light through the leaded panes had shifted to the color of weak tea. Somewhere far off in the house, a clock struck 12, slowly, in the deliberate way of clocks in old houses. She drew the pewter button out of her pocket. She did not plan to. Her hand did it without her. She set the button on the table beside the commonplace book. He looked at it. He did not move. When he spoke, his voice had gone to a place that was not quite steady. "You kept it. My mother said it was the crest of a house that had lost a son. She said I was to keep it because it had been given to me, and because gifts given by lonely children should not be thrown away. Your mother is a wise woman." "My mother doesn't know," Marisol said, "that the son was you." "No," he said. "I imagine she does not." He looked at the button for a very long time. He did not pick it up. Then, slowly, he reached into the inner pocket of his coat, and he drew out something small wrapped in a square of dark blue silk. He set it on the table beside the button. He unfolded the silk. A wooden horse, 6 inches long, Its paint was rubbed almost away on the saddle, and one ear was chipped. Tied around its right foreleg was a yellow ribbon, faded almost to cream. She could not breathe. "You carry it with you," she said. "Today," he said. "Yes. I took it out this morning, when Mrs. Penhallow's letter came up to say that you were on the drive. I did not." He stopped. "I did not believe I would need to show it. I did not believe you would remember enough to need to see it." "I remembered the button," she said. "Not the horse. I'm sorry." "Don't be." His eyes met hers, properly, for the first time since he had sat down. "Don't be sorry. The promise was a child's promise, Miss Wren. You owe the woman you have become nothing on its account. And yet you have carried it for 14 years. Yes. Why?" He looked at her, and she saw, with a clarity that frightened her, that the answer to that question was the answer to many other questions, and that he was not going to give it to her today. "Because," he said, "it was the only thing I had ever been given that was given for nothing in return." She did not know what to say. She did not have to. He folded the silk back over the horse, tucked it into his coat, and stood. "I have kept you from your work, Miss Wren. Forgive me. The library is yours from this afternoon. Dine with my sister and me at 7, if you will. Idony will not forgive either of us if you do not. I will dine with you, Your Grace." He inclined his head. He went to the door. He paused with his hand on it. "Miss Wren, Your Grace." "The button," he said. "Keep it. It was given to you. It is yours." He closed the door very gently behind him. Marisol sat alone in the cold library for a long time. She did not pick the button up. She did not yet understand why. The invitation came on a Tuesday, in a cream envelope sealed with pale green wax. Lady Honora Marchwell at home, the 14th of November, dancing after supper. Marisol had been at Hartmoor 17 days. In those 17 days, she had catalogued 138 volumes, learned that Theron Vial took his coffee black at 6 and his correspondence at 7, and discovered that Idony was the kind of friend who arrived in your room at 10:30 at night, with a stolen plum cake and an opinion on everything. She had not, in those 17 days, been alone with him in the library again. He was careful. He came into the library when Idony was there, or when the housekeeper was passing through with linens, or for 10 precise minutes after breakfast to ask after her progress. It should have reassured her. It did not. "You will come with us, of course," Idony announced over breakfast, the morning the invitation arrived, waving the cream card like a flag. "Lady Marchwell is a dragon, but she throws the best dances of the autumn, and Theron has been refusing her invitations for 2 years, so she will be in absolute raptures when he accepts. I am not on the guest list, Idony. You will be by tomorrow. Lady Marchwell would put a sheep on her guest list if it was rumored to be staying at Hartmoor, and you, my dear, are considerably more interesting than a sheep." "Idony," Theron said, without looking up from his post. "It's a compliment, Theron. Do try to keep up." The card came on the afternoon mail. Mrs. Penhallow took Marisol's measurements with the impassive efficiency of a person who had measured many girls for many gowns. A modiste was sent for from the nearest market town. A length of dark blue silk arrived in a flat box, and on the morning of the 14th, Bryn came up the stairs at 4 o'clock with an armful of underskirts and a face flushed with importance. The dress, when Marisol stood in front of the long glass in her room, was the color of deep water. It had a low square neckline trimmed in a thin band of cream lace. The sleeves were short and slightly puffed. The skirt fell to her ankles in a soft, heavy line that made her look, for the first time in her life, like a woman in a painting, rather than a woman who had walked a mile from a broken-wheeled mail coach. "Oh, miss," Bryn said softly. "Oh, miss, you look like someone else. Like yourself, miss. Only the version of yourself you didn't know you had." Marisol could not answer that. She slid the pewter button into the small inner pocket Bryn had stitched into the seam of the bodice. She had asked for the pocket without explaining why, and Bryn, bless her, had not asked. And she went down the stairs. Thanarin and Idony were waiting in the entrance hall. Idony, in pale rose silk, gave a small cry of delight and crossed at once to take both her hands. Theron did not move. He had been turning a glove over and over in his hand. He stopped turning it. He looked at Marisol as she came down the last 3 steps, and for one unguarded second, she saw on his face the same expression she had seen 17 days before. The expression of a man confirming the answer to a question he had been carrying alone. And then it was gone, folded away as neatly as a letter, and he inclined his head and said, "Miss Wren, you will do credit to my sister tonight." "Theron," Idony said, in the voice of a person who had given up on her brother, "you are hopeless." "I am polite." "You are hopeless." In the carriage, Idony chattered. Theron said almost nothing. Marisol watched the dark country roll past the window and felt the pewter button against her ribs and tried, with all her power, not to think about what came next. Marchwell House was lit from within like a paper lantern. Music, strings, a flute somewhere, spilled from the open doors as their carriage drew up. Footmen in livery the color of holly leaves handed them down. Marisol stepped onto the gravel and felt, for the first time, the full weight of what she had agreed to. She was not Miss Wren the cataloguer in this place. She was a young woman arriving on the arm of the Duke of Heartmore, and in this country, at this season, that was a thing that meant something specific. "Steady," Theron said, very low beside her. "You are not on trial. You are a guest." "I am a paid employee, Your Grace." "Tonight," he said, "you are a guest. We will not lie about your circumstances if asked, but we will not volunteer them. Idony has been quite specific on the point, and Idony, when specific, is unstoppable." She looked up at him. He was looking straight ahead. "Why have you come?" she asked, very quietly. "You have refused these invitations for 2 years." "Because tonight I should rather not refuse one." He did not look at her when he said it. Lady Honora Marchwell was a woman of perhaps 60, with a very straight back and the bright, hard eyes of a person who had not been surprised by anything in 30 years. She greeted Theron with the practiced warmth of a hostess collecting a prize, kissed Idony on both cheeks, and turned her attention on Marisol. "Miss Wren, I had not heard the name. What is your family?" "My father was for many years the steward at Ashbourne, my lady, in the time of the late Earl of Lindenmere." "A steward," Lady Marchwell repeated, as though tasting a word she had not used in a long while. "How extraordinary. Well, do go in." Idony's hand tightened on Marisol's elbow as they moved past. "Don't," she murmured. "Don't let her see it land. She'll feed on it for a week if she sees it land." It didn't land. Liar. It had landed, but less than Marisol had braced for. The truth of her father's profession was a small, sharp pebble, and she had been struck by larger. The ballroom was a long room with a polished oak floor and 3 chandeliers blazing with wax candles. And there, near the orchestra, in a gown of the most brilliant blood-red silk Marisol had ever seen, stood a woman watching their entrance with the perfectly still attention of a hawk. "Oh," Idony said softly, not delighted. Not at all. "Oh, of course she's here." "Who?" "Lady Persephone Calder. Theron." Idony's voice dropped further. "Theron, look. She's seen you." Theron had already seen her. His face did not change. But Marisol, who had been studying his face for 17 days, felt the shift in him, the way one feels the air shift before a storm. "Walk on," he said quietly. "Idony, walk on. Miss Wren, with me." Lady Persephone moved through the room toward them with the unhurried grace of a woman who had never had to hurry for anything in her life. Up close, she was extraordinary, perhaps 26, ash blonde, with very pale skin and eyes the color of a winter sky. The red of her gown was the only color she wore. It was enough. "Theron." Her voice was low, soft, intimate. "You came? I had thought you would not." "Lady Persephone." "It has been. What is it now? 18 months? 21. A small, knowing smile. "You always did keep count." She turned, slowly, and looked at Marisol. "And this is Miss Marisol Wren," Theron said evenly. "She is presently engaged in cataloging my late father's library. My sister has befriended her." "How useful," Lady Persephone said. And the word, useful, was a small, beautifully aimed knife. "Miss Wren, how do you find the work?" "Slow, my lady. There are many books." "And how long do you expect to remain at Hartmoor?" "As long as the cataloging requires." "And how long is that?" "As long as it takes." Lady Persephone's smile did not waver, but something very small and very cold moved behind her eyes. "How resourceful you are. Theron, do let me know when you are next in town. I should so like to call." She inclined her head and was gone. Idony exhaled through her teeth. "Theron," she whispered. "What is she doing here?" "What she has always done." "Which is?" "Waiting," he said. "Persephone is very good at waiting." He did not explain. He did not have to. Marisol understood, with the cold clarity of a woman who had grown up watching other women, that 21 months ago something had ended between Theron Vial and Lady Persephone Calder, and that in Lady Persephone's view of the matter, it had not, in fact, ended at all. The orchestra struck up a country dance. Idony was claimed at once by a young man with a friendly face and ginger hair. Theron turned to Marisol. "Will you dance, Miss Wren?" "Your Grace, It is the second dance that one has to be careful of," he said, almost lightly. "The first is only friendliness. Will you?" She put her hand in his. She had been taught the country dances at her mother's knee. She had never danced them in a ballroom, in dark blue silk, with a man whose hand at her waist made her forget what her own feet were supposed to do. He led well. He did not speak. They moved through the figures of the dance, in a silence that was not awkward, but was, somehow, weighted, as though the music had been written for the conversation they were not having. When the dance ended, he bowed over her hand. "Thank you, Miss Wren." "Thank you, Your Grace." He did not let her hand go at once, for perhaps a second longer than was usual. Then he did, and he was the careful, measured Duke of Hartmoor again. But she had seen the second. So had Lady Persephone Calder, watching from across the room. It was nearly midnight when Marisol slipped out onto the terrace for air. The night was cold and very clear. Frost was forming on the stone balustrade. She set her gloved hands on it and looked out over a dark garden lit by 2 distant lanterns and tried to slow her breathing. A footstep behind her. Not Theron's. She knew his step now. "Miss Wren." "Lady Persephone." Marisol turned. Lady Persephone stood 3 paces away, a dark velvet wrap around her bare shoulders, her face composed and lovely in the lantern light. "Forgive me," Persephone said, "for following you. I wanted only to say one thing, and I would prefer to say it without an audience." "Of course, my lady." "Theron Vial," Lady Persephone said, "is not a man who recovers from disappointments. I tell you this kindly. Whatever he has, whatever he believes you to be, please be careful with it. He has been broken once already. He will not survive being broken twice. I'm not in a position, my lady, to break his grace of anything." "No," a small smile. "Then you do not yet understand the position you are in." She turned. She was almost gone before Marisol found her voice. "My lady, what disappointed him? 21 months ago, what disappointed him?" A long pause. Lady Persephone did not turn back. "I did," she said softly, "and I have spent every day since being sorry for it." She went. Marisol stood on the cold terrace, the pewter button warm against her ribs, and understood that the careful man inside the house behind her had been carrying more than one thing for a very long time. They did not speak of it on the carriage ride home. Idony, exhausted and pleased with herself, fell asleep against Marisol's shoulder before they had left the village. Theron sat across from them in the dark of the carriage, with his eyes on the window. When they reached Hartmoor, he handed Idony down first, then Marisol. His hand at her elbow was steady. He did not look at her. "Good night, Miss Wren." "Good night, Your Grace." She went up to her room. She undid the dress with hands that were not entirely her own. She put the pewter button into the small wooden box on her writing desk. She got into bed and did not sleep until the windows had begun to gray. She told herself as she lay there, "He is a man who has loved before. He is a man who has loved a woman in a red silk gown who is sorry for what she did. None of that has anything to do with you." She told herself, "You came here for 10 guineas a month." She did not quite believe herself. She avoided the library the next morning. She took her breakfast in the small parlor with Idony, and afterwards walked in the kitchen garden with a shawl pulled tight against the November cold, and pretended she was thinking about the cataloging. She was not thinking about the cataloging. It was Idony who came to find her, perhaps an hour before noon, with snow beginning to settle very lightly on her hair. "He's in the library," Idony said. "He has been in the library since 7 this morning. He has not eaten. Mrs. Penhallow has tried twice. He sent her away both times. He is Marisol. He is not himself." "I'm not sure that is my concern, Idony." Idony looked at her, It was not a long look, but it was not a kind one either, in the way that the truest looks of friendship are not kind. "Marisol Wren," she said, "do not pretend. Not with me. Not after last night." The snow fell between them in small, slow flakes. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to go and tell him that whatever Persephone Calder said to you on that terrace was hers, not yours. I saw her follow you, Marisol. So did he. He will not ask. He will sit in that library until dark and not ask. And tomorrow he will have built a wall, and the wall will be very polite and very high and very permanent. You have today. Go and tell him." "Idony, I cannot." "You can." Marisol stood in the cold garden. She thought of the careful man inside the house, the man who had set the commonplace book on the table without their hands touching, the man who had carried a wooden horse for 14 years. She thought of the woman in the red silk gown. "I have spent every day since being sorry for it." She went to the library. He was at the long table by the window. The commonplace book was open in front of him. He was not reading it. The grate was cold. He had not lit the fire. He looked up when she came in. His face did not change. "Miss Wren, Your Grace, I had not thought you would come down today. I thought you might wish, Your Grace." He stopped. "I came to tell you," she said, "what Lady Persephone said to me on the terrace last night." A flicker. Very small. He sat back, very slightly, in his chair. "That is not. I'm going to tell you," Marisol said, "because if I do not, you will spend today and tomorrow and the rest of this week carefully not asking. And I find," her voice caught, "I find that I would rather not be carefully not asked. Your Grace." He looked at her. "Sit down, Miss Wren," he said quietly. "Please." She sat. She told him. She told him exactly what Lady Persephone had said, in the words Lady Persephone had used. She did not soften it. She did not embellish it. She left nothing out. Not the velvet wrap, not the small smile, not, "I have spent every day since being sorry for it." When she finished, the library was very still. He was looking at the cold grate. 21 months ago, he said after a long while, I asked Lady Persephone Calder to marry me. She accepted. The engagement was not announced. It was to be announced at a dinner my grandmother was to give in the spring. Lady Persephone wrote to me, the week before the dinner, to say that on reflection she could not be the wife of a man who lived as I did, that I was too quiet, too retired, too unwilling to take her into society. The letter was 3 pages long. I burned it the day I received it, and I have not, in 21 months, told a single living soul what was in it. Marisol did not speak. She has since married another man, he said. She is a widow now, 6 months. I knew that her widowhood would bring her back into the country. I did not know that she would be at Marchwell House last night. If I had, you would not have come. I would not have come. Why did she follow me to the terrace, Your Grace? Because she has decided, now that she is widowed, that she was mistaken in her letter. Ah, and because she saw, last night, that I have not been mistaken in my silence. The fire that was not lit said nothing. Miss Wren, Your Grace, I am not the cause of any of this. I want you to know that. I came to Hartmoor for 10 guineas a month and a roof for a winter. I did not come to be a piece on anyone's board. I have a sister whose lungs are failing. I have a mother who has not slept 3 full hours in a year. I have a father who cannot meet my eyes since the day the bailiff came. I came because there was nothing else for me to do. I know, he said. I have always known. Then why? Her voice broke. She did not let it stop her. Why did you not let me be only that? He looked at her. It was the first time in 17 days that he had looked at her without being careful. Because, he said, I have spent 14 years being only the man who kept a wooden horse. And on the morning you walked up my drive, I discovered that I had been waiting all that time to be allowed to be something else. And I didn't know how to be that other thing without telling you immediately that I had been waiting. I am sorry for it. The snow at the window had thickened. Your Grace, Theron, I cannot, not always, not in front of the household, but here, now, once. Theron, so that I have heard you say it once. She closed her eyes. Theron. The sound of his name in her own voice was a small, terrible relief, like setting down a thing she had not known she was carrying. When she opened her eyes, he was watching her. Thank you, he said. What do we do now, Your Grace? He did not correct her that time. Perhaps he understood that Your Grace was, also, a way of staying upright. I do not know. I think we let the snow fall today. I think we light the fire. I think we work on the cataloging for 2 hours. I think we have lunch with my sister. I think we do not, today, decide anything we do not have to decide. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I have a letter to write. To whom? To Lady Persephone Calder. He stood. He went to the cold grate. He laid the kindling himself, and he struck the flint, and the fire caught, and the small, leaping orange light moved across his face for the first time that morning. Stay there, Miss Wren, he said, without turning. I'll have Bryn bring up coffee. We have a great many books to attend to. She stayed. She did not yet know that a footman from Marchwell House had ridden up the drive an hour before dawn, with a sealed letter for the Dowager Duchess, and that the Dowager, having read it, had not yet decided what to do. The Dowager Duchess of Hartmoor read the letter 3 times. It was on cream paper. The hand was elegant, slightly slanted, and she knew it well. She had been receiving it off and on for the better part of a decade. The seal had been red wax. The contents took up 2 pages, but the substance of them could have been written in 3 lines. Dear Madam, I have reason to believe a young person presently resident in your house is not who she has represented herself to be. I write to you as the only person of your blood with the wisdom to receive this information temperately. I should like to call upon you, alone, at your earliest convenience. Yours with great respect, Persephone, Lady Calder. The dowager set the letter down. She rang the bell. Bryn, send my compliments to Lady Calder by return groom. I shall receive her tomorrow morning at 11. And Bryn, not a word to my grandson. Not a word to Lady Adoni. Not a word to Miss Wren. Yes, your grace. The girl went out. The dowager sat with the letter in her lap and thought for a long while about her son. Lady Persephone Calder arrived the next morning at 5 minutes before 11, in a black-trimmed traveling coat, gloved, gracious, and entirely composed. Madam, Persephone said, thank you for receiving me. Sit, Lady Calder. You have written that you have information about Miss Wren. I should prefer to hear it without ornament. A flicker of something across Lady Persephone's face. Of course, madam. I will be brief. Miss Wren's father, Edmund Wren, was not dismissed from the stewardship at Ashbourne for the conventional reasons. He was dismissed because 14 years ago, in the autumn before he left, he was discovered to have been falsifying the rent rolls of a particular hamlet for his own profit. The matter was hushed by the late Earl of Lindenmere, who was a kind man and unwilling to ruin a young family. Mr. Wren left Ashbourne with a small settlement and an undertaking not to seek further employment in any great house. To my knowledge, he honored the undertaking. His daughter has not. The dowager set her cup down very carefully in its saucer. You are certain of this? I am, madam. The man who first brought the matter to the late Earl's attention was my own father's land agent. The story has been known in our family for 14 years. We have, of course, never mentioned it, out of regard for the Wren family. Until today. Until today, madam. A pause. And what, Lady Calder, do you imagine I will do with this information? Lady Persephone set her cup down. I imagine, madam, that you will do what you have always done. You will protect your grandson. The dowager looked at her for a very long moment. Get out of my house, Lady Calder. Persephone went very still. Madam, get out of my house. You will not be received here again. You came here this morning with a kindness so calculated I can almost admire it, and a malice so unconcealed I cannot. You did not write to me to protect my grandson. You wrote to me to remove a girl whose presence in this house has reminded a man you once threw away that he is capable of being loved by someone other than you. Get out. Lady Persephone rose. Her face did not change. It was, the dowager thought afterwards, the most expensive composure she had ever seen. Madam, Out. She went. The dowager sat alone with the cold tea for a long while. Then she rang the bell again. Bryn, ask Miss Wren to come to me. Now, please. Marisol came. She had been in the library. She came with a smudge of ink on the side of her hand, and her hair coming a little out of its pins. Sit, Miss Wren. Marisol sat. The dowager told her. She told her without ornament, the bare facts, as Lady Persephone Calder had presented them. She watched Marisol's face as she told her, and she saw the things she had needed to see. First, surprise. Then, recognition. Then a slow, absolute paling, and a hand that went to the side of the chair as though to steady a body that had become, in the space of 1 minute, considerably heavier than its bones. Oh, Marisol said. You knew. Miss Wren, you knew. I knew that my father had done something. I knew that we left Ashbourne, not because his post had ended, but because something had happened. My mother would not speak of it. My father has not been able to. I knew there was a wrongness. I did not know it was that. I did not know it was theft. You did not ask. Marisol's voice was very small. I did not ask, Your Grace, because for a long time I thought that if I asked, I would learn a thing about my father that I would not be able to forgive him for. And my father has been a broken man for half my life. And I could not afford to add my own unforgiveness to the things that had broken him. The Dowager was silent. You came into this house, she said at last, without the full truth of yourself. Yes, my grandson does not know. No, Your Grace. Will you tell him? A pause, a very long one. Yes, Marisol said. I will tell him. I will tell him this afternoon, and then I will pack, Your Grace, and I will be gone before dark. Miss Wren, Your Grace. Marisol stood. Her face was white but very steady. You warned me, the first day, not to let him drown in it. I have, instead, brought a thing into this house that he should not have to carry. I came here, Your Grace, on the strength of my father's name. The strength was a fiction. I will not stay in a house under a fiction. I will tell him myself. I will not have him hear it from anyone else. She curtsied. She went. The Dowager sat alone in the small writing room for a long time. She had expected, she realized, to be relieved. She was not relieved. She was, for the first time in a great many years, afraid. She did not tell him in the library. She told him an hour later, in the small parlor, with the door open, because she had decided on the way down the stairs that she would not allow herself the privacy that would make the telling easier on her. She told him in 11 sentences. She did not cry. She did not embellish. She did not soften. When she had finished, Theron Vial did not speak for a long time. He was standing at the window. He had not, at any point during the 11 sentences, turned to look at her. Miss Wren, he said finally, Your Grace, did you know when you accepted the post? I did not know it was theft, Your Grace. I knew there was a thing my father would not speak of. Did you know, when I told you in the entrance hall, who the boy by the fence was? No, Your Grace. Have you, in any of our conversations since, deliberately concealed it from me? I have not, Your Grace, because I did not know it. But I knew there was something, Your Grace, and I did not tell you there was something. And that, her voice caught, that is its own concealment. A silence. Pack, he said, if you wish to. I will not stop you. I will not also ask you to. The cataloging is unfinished. The 10 guineas a month are owed. I will not. He stopped. He did not turn around. I will not, Miss Wren, ask you to stay tonight. I do not trust myself to ask it well. I will be in the East Wing until morning. I would be obliged if you would decide, by then, what you wish to do. Your Grace, please. She went. She packed. She did not, in the end, leave that night. But when the morning came, the bed in the green coverlet had not been slept in. She had spent the long hours from midnight to dawn sitting at the writing desk, with a pen in her hand and a single sheet of paper in front of her, writing and tearing up and writing again. And what she wrote, in the end, was not a letter of resignation. It was something else. The East Wing was not, as Mrs. Penhallow had implied on Marisol's first morning, forbidden because of any scandal. It was forbidden because it was the wing in which the late Duke had died, and Theron Vial had not been able, in 9 years, to enter it without a great deal of preparation. He spent the night in it. He did not sleep. He sat in the chair beside his father's old writing table, and he watched the moon move across the long window, and he did the thing he had spent 9 years learning not to do, which was to feel, all at once, all the things he had been carrying. He felt, first, the cold, flat shock of betrayal. He felt, second, a slow, surprised recognition that the shock was smaller than he had expected, smaller than the shock he had felt when Lady Persephone's letter had come, 21 months before. Smaller, much smaller, than the shock he had felt the day his father had died. He felt, third, the thing he had been most afraid of, which was that even now, with the truth of it laid in front of him, he did not, quite, want her to leave. He felt, fourth, ashamed of the third. And then, somewhere in the long hours between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, when the moon had cleared the window and the east wing had grown so cold that his breath was visible in the dark, he felt the thing his grandmother had told him, the morning he had become Duke at 18, that he would feel one day if he was lucky. One day, Theron, you will be tired enough to be honest. He had not known at 18 what she meant. He knew now. He sat in the cold and let himself be honest. He was not angry at Marisol Wren. He was not, in fact, angry at Edmund Wren, whom he had never met, and whose theft of rents from a hamlet 14 years ago could not, in honesty, weigh against a daughter who had walked up his drive in mud-stiff boots and given him back the shape of his own life. He was angry, he discovered, at himself. He was angry that he had spent 14 years being the man who had kept a wooden horse, instead of being the man who had asked, at any point in the last 10 of those years, after the family of the small girl who had given it to him. If he had asked in the years after, he might have learned then that the Wren family had fallen on hard times, and he might have done, with a young man's unconsidered grace, the thing the Dowager had done that afternoon for Lady Persephone Calder. He might have made it impossible, with a few quiet letters, for the Wrens to be poor. He had not asked. He had carried the horse, and he had been alone with it. And the Wren family had gone south, and the daughter had grown up, and a sister had developed a cough, and a father had stopped meeting her eyes, and a girl had walked up his drive 14 years later because there was nothing else left for her to do. He sat in the cold. At about 5 o'clock in the morning, he stood up, and he went to the door of the east wing, and he opened it, and he walked along the dark corridor toward the west wing, and he did not knock at her door. He stopped opposite it, and he set his hand flat against the wood for the space of 3 breaths, and then he turned around and went back to his own rooms, and he wrote, by candlelight, a letter. The letter was short. It said, Miss Wren, whatever you decide, I want you to know 2 things. The first is that no part of what your father did 14 years ago is yours to atone for. The second is that I have, since the morning you arrived, been a coward. I have been careful of you because I have been afraid of you. I have been afraid of you because you are the first person in 9 years whose presence has made me forget, for whole hours at a time, that I am alone. I did not know how to say that without frightening you, so I said nothing. I am ashamed of the silence. I am not ashamed of what was underneath it. If you stay, I will not ask anything of you that you don't freely choose, and I will not, ever, ask you to honor the promise of a child. If you go, you will go with my respect, with the wages owed to you in full, and with whatever assistance can be arranged for your sister, your mother, and your father, discreetly, through the Reverend Halliday, in such a way that it cannot be refused. That is not a condition. It will be done either way. I ask only that you leave me a line, before you go, with your direction. There is one letter I should like to write to you in a year's time, and I should like to know where to send it. I am, Miss Wren, more grateful for the 17 days than for the 14 years. Theron. He did not seal it. He folded it. He went out of his rooms in the gray before sunrise. He pushed it under her door. He went down to the library where the fire had not been lit, and he laid the kindling himself, and he sat in the dark beside the small, leaping flame, and he waited for whatever the morning would bring. What the morning brought was Bryn with a tray. Your Grace. Bryn. Miss Wren says, would you come to the library at 9, please? She says, She says she has something to read to you. He looked up. Did she sleep? No, Your Grace, she did not. Has she packed? A pause. No, Your Grace. He did not immediately trust himself to speak. Tell her I will come at 9. Yes, Your Grace. The girl went. He sat with the coffee cooling on the tray and watched the fire and counted the strokes of the great clock in the hall as it told him 8. At 9, he went to the library. She was at the long table by the window. She was wearing the dark green wool she wore most days. Her hair was pinned up, but not perfectly. There were ink stains on the side of her hand. There was a single sheet of paper in front of her, written close on both sides, and she did not look up when he came in. Miss Wren, Your Grace, you wish to read me something? Yes. She still did not look up. It is not a letter of resignation, she said. I want you to know that before I begin. I know it is not a letter of resignation. She did look up, then. How do you know? Because you are still here. She looked at him for a long time. She picked up the paper. She read. What she read was not the letter she had begun at midnight. That letter had been an apology. 3 pages of it, dense and careful. Every sentence weighed against the next. She had torn it up at 4 in the morning. What she read instead was the letter she had begun at 5. Your Grace, she read, I came to your house with a debt I did not know I was carrying. I did not know my father's, and I did not know my own. I had told myself that I came for 10 guineas a month and a roof for a winter, and that was true. But it was not all that was true. I came because the Reverend Halliday's letter, when it arrived in our front room in October, mentioned the name of a house I had never been to, and the name of a county I had never seen, and something in me, something I didn't then have a word for, said go. I had forgotten the boy by the fence. I had not forgotten the button. I came because the something without a word had recognized the name of the place before the rest of me did, and I was too tired, and too poor, and too frightened to ask it why. I did not lie to you in your entrance hall when I said that the girl who gave you the horse was not me any longer. She is not. But I did not tell you, because I did not yet know how to, that the woman she has become walked up your drive on the 11th of October because somewhere beneath everything else she had been waiting 14 years to walk up it. I am not going to stay in your house under the name of a debt, not my father's, and not the child's. I am not the girl by the fence, and I am not the cataloger of your father's library, and I am not, Your Grace. I am not the answer to any letter that was written about me by anyone but myself. I am Marisol Wren. I am 20 years old. I have a sister whose lungs are failing, and a mother who is the bravest person I know, and a father whom I have decided, this morning, that I will go on loving in spite of what he did, because the alternative is to spend my life as the person who stopped. I have catalogued 194 of your father's books. I should like, if you will let me, to finish the rest. I should like to do it as an employee for the first month, and as a friend for the second. And after the second, I should like, if it should still seem to either of us that we wish it, to be courted by you in the ordinary way that ordinary people are courted, and to make, slowly, a thing that is not built on a promise made when I was 6. That is the offer, Your Grace. It is the only one I have. I am not asking you to accept it today. I am asking you only to read this and to tell me whether I should unpack my case. Yours, Marisol. She set the paper down. She did not look up. The fire burned in its small, careful way. Theron Vial crossed the library, which had grown, without either of them noticing, to be the warmest room in the house. He did not sit. He stopped opposite her, on the other side of the long table. Unpack your case, Miss Wren." She closed her eyes. "Marisol," he said very quietly, "unpack your case." She did. He courted her, as she had asked, in the ordinary way that ordinary people are courted. He did it badly, at first, because he had never courted anyone in the ordinary way of anything, and Ideny spent most of December laughing at him, which he bore with a patience that astonished his grandmother. He did it better in the new year. By March, the cataloging was finished. By April, the Wren family had been moved, discreetly, through the Reverend Halliday, in such a way that it could not be refused, into a small, warm house on the southern edge of the Hartmore estate, with a garden and a south-facing room for Linnea, whose cough, by midsummer, had begun for the first time in 2 years to lessen. By June, Edmund Wren had written, at his daughter's quiet insistence, a letter to the present Earl of Lindenmere, confessing in his own hand the thing he had done 14 years before, and offering, against the small settlement he had once received, to repay what could be repaid. The young Earl, who had been born after the matter, wrote back a kind, surprised letter, and the thing was closed. By August, Tehran Vielle asked Marisol Wren to marry him in the kitchen garden, beside the low stone wall, with the smell of late roses and the very faint sound of Ideny pretending not to listen from the gravel path. She said yes, not in front of a ballroom, not in front of a watching crowd, in front of the cook's tabby, who was sunning herself on the wall and did not appear, on the whole, to be impressed. The wedding was small. The dowager wept once, briefly, when no one was looking. Ideny was the worst-behaved bridesmaid in the county. Bryn, who was promoted to lady's maid the same day, cried steadily through all 3 of the readings. Lady Persephone Calder was not invited. She sent, nonetheless, a wedding present, a porcelain figurine of a small horse, which the dowager intercepted at the door, examined briefly, and gave to a footman with instructions to return it. It was, Theron said afterwards, the only piece of correspondence with that house his grandmother had ever undertaken on his behalf, without consulting him, and he loved her for it. A year later, in October, Marisol stood in the library at Hartmore, which was now her library, as much as it had ever been the late Duke's, and she went to the small drawer in the writing table, where Theron kept his most private things, and she opened it. The wooden horse was inside, the yellow ribbon faded almost to cream. Beside it lay the pewter button. He had taken it, with her permission, the night before their wedding, and he had set it next to the horse, and he had closed the drawer. She had not opened the drawer since. She opened it now because she had something to add to it. It was a letter, a single sheet of paper, in her own handwriting, dated that morning. It said only, "To the boy by the fence." I came back. M. She set it on top of the horse. She closed the drawer. She went to find her husband, who was, of course, in the library, at the long table by the window, where the light was best, and she sat down in the chair next to his, and she did not, that morning, get up again for a very long while. Dear listener, I want to thank you, very simply, for staying with this story to the end. This space exists because of you, the quiet ones who write to me at midnight to say that a line caught you off guard, the ones who listen in the kitchen while supper cooks, the ones who have, somewhere inside you, a pewter button of your own, a small kept thing that has waited a long time to be recognized. I see you. I am writing for you. If a moment in this story made you feel something, a line, a gesture, a turn of the page, I would love to know which one. Tell me in the comments. The stories that come next are shaped, more than you know, by the lines that find you. And if you would like more stories like this, quiet, slow, full of weather and books, and people who are afraid of being loved and are loved anyway, please consider subscribing. Until next time, be brave with the small kept things. They have waited. Good night.